Welcome back to the Code Wolf, and welcome to the third and final video in the Blazor file upload series. This series is designed to be the ultimate guide for uploading files in Blazor, and it's been updated for .NET 8 and all of the latest and greatest techniques. In each video of this series, we explore how to upload files using a different Blazor rendering mode, and in this video, we're going to take a look at the Blazor Interactive Server method, formerly known as Blazor SignalR. This sample project with all three rendering modes is also available on GitHub at the link in the description, so check that out and watch the other videos as well if you're interested in those other modes. So with all that said, let's jump in and upload some files. A quick reminder to please hit the subscribe and like buttons to support the channel, and be sure to check out the other videos and playlists on my channel for more info on Blazor, AI, and other cool topics. Okay, so I have our file upload app open here, and for this video, let's make sure that we're on the SignalR page over on the left here. So if you want to see how to do these uploads with server static or WebAssembly, the other Blazor rendering modes, just check out the other videos in this playlist on my channel. So we want to see how to upload files using Blazor SignalR. So remember, this rendering mode keeps an open circuit back to the server, and it processes things on the server side and then updates them in real time on the client side to kind of simulate a client experience. So if we go back to our sample app, you should see this similar solution on the right, and just make sure you have an images folder at the root for where we'll upload these. And let's just kind of walk through this code together to make sure we understand what it does. I've made this available so we don't have to type out everything, but I do want to cover all the key concepts and details to make sure we know what's going on here. So starting at the top, we of course have our route to get to this page. So this is a routable component like we just saw in the browser. And then we have a couple using statements, but more importantly, we're injecting a couple services here. So one is the web host environment, and this will be used to save our images after they're uploaded. And we also have a Blob service client for if we want to talk to Azure. More on that a little bit later. One other note that we're using the interactive server render mode, and that's what's going to give us that Blazor circuit. So then we have some title text here, and we can display some error or success messages if we want to. But the real heart of this component is this edit form section here. So let's take a look at this in a little more depth. So we have our Blazor edit form component, and we're binding our data to a ticket model. Now that class lives at the bottom of the file here. I've just included it in the same file for simplicity, but it includes a title and a description that are required. And then there's this attachments list. And for that, we want to use a read-only list of the iBrowser file type. This type is important. This will behave properly, and it's the easiest type to work with when you're uploading. .NET does have a lot of different file class types that can get a little confusing, so just make sure you're using this type here. So there's our ticket class. That's what we're binding our data to. And we also want to set the form to be a post method so that we're submitting data. And then we want to bind the onValidSubmit handler to this onSubmit method. And that's defined a little bit further down. We'll revisit this in a moment. Lastly, on this line, just make sure you include this multi-part form data encoding type. This is actually really important, and a lot of people forget to add this, and it won't work, so just make sure that's there. We also display some validation, but the other really important part here is just these input fields, and that's where we're binding to our ticket model. Now, this input file component is obviously the most important part of this form, and this includes an onChange handler where we can call a method, and for this component, I've called that setFile. So if we look at this setFile, this will get called every time the user picks an image to upload. Now that's not the same as actually uploading the image, and that's probably the most confusing part of this setup. There's kind of two handlers here. One is when the user actually picks the image in the browser, and the other is when they actually upload the image. So whenever the input file selection changes, we call this method, and then we add the file that they picked to our attachments. So this attachments, remember that's the list of browser files that we can upload, so that'll update every time they select a file. And we're also including the multiple keyword here just to let them upload multiple files. Now, when they actually click the submit button, that's when that onSubmit handler method will fire. And that's the main method that processes all of our logic. So when they submit the form, this fires. And so for each file in the ticket attachments, if they selected multiple, we go through this process of saving the files locally as well as uploading them to Azure. I've included this blob storage upload just in case you're working with the clouds, since that's a really common scenario. But let's start with the local file saving here. So first we create a path to our local folder where we want to save that. So that's going to be our content root path combined with the images folder combined with the safe file name. So right above that, we're using the web utility to encode any potential harmful characters. And then we're creating a path to where we want to save the image using that safe file name and these other utilities. And then we just use a standard .NET file stream and copy the data to that file stream. So saving locally is really straightforward. Now, blob storage isn't too bad either. We basically just get the blob client here that we injected into our component. So if you remember at the top here, we injected a couple things. So there's our blob client. And then all we have to do is get the container that we want to save to, which in this case is called images. And then we call the upload blob async method and just copy those file contents into there. Now, I've also prefixed this random number here. That's because blob storage will complain if a blob already exists, and we don't want to deal with branching workflows to check whether it exists or not and so on. So I'm just adding a random number for this demo, and that way we can kind of just upload unlimited files without any issues. Now, of course, you'd also want to take that title and description that the user entered and save that somewhere as well. Remember, in a real app, you'd probably save this title and description to a database, as well as some sort of path or reference to the image out in blob storage or out on the server file system. Usually you don't save the image itself directly in the database. You can in a lot of scenarios, but usually it's more common to store those files somewhere else. So this is just where you would save that info and a reference to the image, but we're just focused on the actual file uploads right now. And so if everything goes successfully, we update our message to say file uploaded, and if there's a problem, we just display that error message instead. And remember, there's our ticket at the bottom. So that's kind of the main flow of the component. I also want to mention you do need to register your blob client over in the program.cs file. So the proper way to do that is to use the add Azure clients helper method. And then inside of there, you can call add blob service client. And this will properly handle our instances through the DI container and all of that. And I've also included the connection string here, which you can find out in Azure if you're familiar with working with blob services. So let's actually walk through a file submission here to see how this works in action. So I'm going to set a breakpoint in each of our methods. And then let's go back out to the browser. And I'll type in a title here and a description. Then let's choose some files. So I'm actually going to grab these 3 files from our 3 favorite characters, of course, and say open. And right as we do that, we hit that set file method. And that's because we selected an image. And remember, we have a separate handler for when the user selects an image so that we can assemble this list of images to upload eventually. This is where we manage kind of the active images in memory that we're going to upload. So I'll click continue, and there's our 3 files there. And now when I hit submit, that's when we land in our onSubmit method. So this is the actual form submission handler, not the handler for selecting a file. And we'll just kind of step through here. So we've got our safe file name, no changes were needed there. And we've got our path to where we want to save that. So I'll just click continue, and we'll hit this breakpoint 2 more times because there were 3 images. So I'll just keep hitting continue, and it looks like that uploaded successfully. So there's our message. And if we check our images folder, there's our images. So there's Link, he's ready to go, and now our app is ready to go. Now we can also jump out to Azure here, and I'm inside of our images container in this CodeWolf storage account. I'm going to assume you have a basic familiarity with Azure if you're interested in file uploads to blob storage. So I'm not going to go into how to create this container or the storage account. But when we refresh this container, you can see, sure enough, there's our 3 images. And we can kind of preview some information over on the right here. So those did upload to blob storage successfully. So that's really all there is to it. I actually kind of like this flow. It's sort of a hybrid between WebAssembly and full server side because you get kind of this dynamic interaction with when the user selects a file, and then you can save directly locally to your computer since the code is executing on the server side. You don't necessarily have to rely on a web service like you do with WebAssembly. But it's more dynamic than just full server side. So check out that GitHub repo, check out the other 2 videos. Let me know in the comments if I missed anything. I really want this to be the comprehensive file upload series. I'll make another video if I have to. But thanks so much for watching, and please hit the like and subscribe buttons, and I'll see you next time right here on the CodeWolf.